All right, welcome back. This week we're going to jump back to Chapter 7 and finish up the BMI application, do a little drawing. Make sure you read the chapter, watch the videos, and Cengage. Your graded assignments this week are the self-test exercises. The BMI application is the programming project, and it should be finished this week. I have given you a file here, assets, and in this you will find a couple of images, 3 images, and a variables.txt. You will use those in your project, and we'll cover that later. Make sure you do the Chapter 7 quiz, and I have included my code for Chapter 6. You can compare it to yours, or if you need a fresh start, this is where Chapter 6 should have ended. The lesson this week, I'm just going to kind of go over how to do this programming exercise that is in your book, and we'll draw this little cylinder here, learn how to draw. So here I have just a simple HTML page. You can see that it is just a simple page with a canvas element named canvas element with an ID of canvas element, and it's 500 by 500 pixels. I got a bunch of buttons on here. That's just for lesson stuff. Actually, we're gonna write these functions here in a second. And the CSS is that, so it's real simple, just a easy page. So when you want to draw a line in JavaScript, you need 4 lines and 2 variables. So you create your function. You got to have a variable for the canvas, and you're going to tell JavaScript where to find the canvas from the HTML page. That's document get element by ID, and we named that canvas element. The other variable you need, in the book and the video, they'll say it's a canvas context. And that is going to be equal to just telling the canvas that we're going to draw in 2D. Typing out this canvas context is a real pain, so I'm going to abbreviate that to CTX just for my own sanity, because you got to write it a bunch of times. So for every line that you draw with JavaScript, you need 4 lines of code. So it kind of gets to be a pain. You have to tell it to begin the path, but you don't pass that any arguments. There is a move to, which is the start position of your line. And then line to, which is the end position of your line. And if you're paying attention, oh my goodness. So if any of you have ever used Photoshop and had to kind of create a line, you actually have to stroke that line for it to put pen to paper and draw it for you. And you kind of have to do that here with JavaScript. So if you pay over here on my thing, this is just a giant grid with X and Y coordinates. You need an X and Y coordinate for the start of the line and an X and Y coordinate for the end of the line. This can be kind of confusing. So the X is the horizontal from left to right. The Y is the up and down from the top to the bottom. So 0.00 is going to be this very top corner. Midway, obviously, on this 500 by 500 grid is going to be 250 and 250. That's the very center of the grid. So, and then 500 and 500 is this left corner. So if I want to draw a line from this corner to this corner, I would move, the move to would be 0, 0, right? And the line 2 would be 500, 500. So we want it to move from the top left to the bottom right. And if I save that and refresh, draw a line, It's not drawing a line. I have something wrong here. Oh, I didn't say function. Function, F-U-N-C-T-I-O-N. Save that, refresh, draw line. What is going on here? Okay, so I like to leave my errors in just so in case you guys run across the same thing. It wasn't working because you have to use camel case. And camel case is very important in these functions that are already written for you. And on line 6 here, you can see move to is capital M. It should be a lowercase m. I hate that because it slows down the video, but sometimes it's important so you can see what's going on. So now when I click draw line, it moves from the top 0, 0 to the bottom 500, 500. Now, if I want to switch that around, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You know, this is, you can move the Y all the way to the top. You can move the X all the way to the top, and it can be kind of confusing. So I want the X to stay, I want the X to move to the other side of the page, from right to left. So I'm going to change that to 500, but I want the Y to stay at 0, because that's my start position. I want just moving it to the other corner. And on the second part, I want the X to go to 0 and the Y to stay at 500. Is that right? I don't know. Let's see. This confuses me every time. Refresh, draw line. Okay. Yep. Now we're going back the other way. So that's how you draw a line up and down. If I want to have a line that goes from the top to the bottom, like a straight line, the X should stay the same up and down, and then the Y should change from the top to the bottom. So this should draw a line from the top to the bottom at 50 pixels in. I control that, draw a line, there we go. So what I want to do now is, I'm just going to copy and paste all these in here, is make a grid. And it's all the same thing. I just move the X 50 pixels in, 50 pixels in, 50 pixels in, and then I do the Y the same way to get horizontal lines. And now, if I grid, change this, refresh, and hit grid, I have a 50 by 50 pixel grid across all 500. And this kind of helps to draw. It helps me figure out where to put stuff on the page, so I know it's centered, I know it's kind of even both ways, and hopefully will help us draw some ovals. So drawing an oval is a bit more difficult. There are actually 7 arguments that you need to draw an oval, and they are these. So you're going to need an X and a Y for the center of your oval. You're going to need an X and a Y for the radius. The radius on the Y-axis and the radius on the X-axis. Now your radius is only halfway, so that number gets doubled, and your circle or oval becomes twice the size. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. So let's create a function for draw an oval. And just to keep it simple, I'm just going to do a simple circle in the center of the screen to start. So you need those same 2 arguments from the make sure you type function. Keep doing that. So you need the same 2 arguments. You want to tell it what the canvas is, what you're drawing on, and then give it a context. And then you need to do the begin path. And then we're going to use ellipse. This is one way to draw circles and ellipses. There's a couple others, but this one's the easiest. So if I'm making sure that I have all my arguments in here, this is your ellipse needs 7 arguments. So you got to put your x coordinate for the center of the oval. Well, on a 500 by 500 grid, we know that's going to be 250. And the x and y are going to be the same because we want it to be in the center, x and y. Then we need the radius for the x-axis and the radius for the y-axis. Well, if we want to cover the whole thing, it's going to be 250 again. This should cover your radius members from the edge to the center. So from left to the center, it's going to be 250, but it's also going to be 250 from the center to the right and up and down both ways. This will make a 500 pixel circle. Then that's 1, 2, 3, 4. The rotation, we're going to leave that at 0. You can rotate it, but I would just change the radius on the x and y axis. So you think of a circle, and then if you're going to turn it, it becomes more of an oval. It's still a circle, but now it looks like an oval. We're not going to mess with that. The rotation, the start angle, same thing. We're not going to mess with that. And the end angle. Now the end angle is a little confusing. What this is, it's not actually creating a whole circle. What it's doing is drawing a line in a circle. So to make sure that line is long enough to go from the start point to the end point, we have to use pi to make our circle. And the way you do that is 2 times math dot pi. And we all know that pi is 3.14. We could do some math and figure this out, but just know this is how you do it. And then we want to stroke that line to make the circle. So let's see if I save this and refresh and then draw my oval. All right, we got a 500 pixel oval. It's huge, it covers the whole, it's perfectly centered. With the grid overlay and everything, kind of, you see it's going straight across these connecting points, so it is a perfect 500 pixel circle. Now if we want to make that smaller, we'll just change the radius, right? Make it a 50 by 50, so it'd actually be 100 pixels. Draw oval, and now it's smaller, and we can see when we put our grid on, it's 50 pixels from left to right and 50 pixels from right, or from center to left, center to right. So it's 100 pixels total diameter. Now if we want to make that an oval, we're going to do, let's do 150 and 25. Oops. Save that, refresh, draw an oval, and there. That kind of looks like the top and bottom of the oval that we were doing, or that we're looking at in the programming exercise. It's just in the wrong place. So we're going to move that up on the y-axis. We'll just move it to 50 pixels on the y-axis. Refresh and draw the oval, and there we go. We got the top. Now we need to make another one to draw the bottom. And instead of 50, we're going to put it at 450, which makes it 50 pixels from the bottom. Refresh, draw oval. Now we have 2 ovals right there. Awesome. And then if we put the grid back on, we can see that we need a line from here to here and from here to here. So this is 100 on the X and 50 on the Y, 100 on the X and 450 on the Y. So draw a line. Do another draw line function. And I'm going to copy these. And then I'm going to copy one of these. So we need it to move from 100 on the X, 50 on the Y, to, again, 100 on the X, because we want it straight up and down, to 450 on the Y. Save that, see what happens. Draw our line and draw our ovals, and there we have a side. So if we just do this again, and then let me get my grid. What is this? 400 to 400. Instead of 100, it should be 400, but it's still moving the same length on the y-axis. So refresh, draw ovals, draw lines. There we go. We have our doohickey. Now, what do we got to do? I think there was a fill. So just like we stroked here, you can specify the kind of stroke, the color, and all that stuff. We're actually going to do that with the fill. Let's say the first oval, we have to give it a fill style. And I'm going to make that equal to the hexadecimal value of 9BBB59. I don't expect you to know this, but you can look up these hexadecimal colors anywhere. So if we use this, we specify a fill style, the color, and then we call the fill, just like we called stroke, we're going to call the fill. And I need to put, I have a tendency not to put my little semicolons in there. I don't know if it makes a difference for real or not. But, so we gave it a fill style, and then we said, all right, use that style to fill the oval. So if I save this, refresh, and draw my ovals, well, it's just black. Why is it just black? It shouldn't be black, it should be green. Let's see if I use a different fill style, if that changes. $806 4A2. That should be purple. Save it, refresh, and draw my ovals. They're both black. All right, so it looks like I did it again. Remember, camel case is so important because it doesn't understand what you're telling it if you don't spell everything perfectly correct. This fill style is not in camel case, so I have to make that style capital S. So if I save this, refresh, and draw my ovals again, I have the colors I want and draw the lines, and now I have the cylinder. And that is as far as I'm going to go in the lesson. On the programming exercise, there are different shades here. These are just different fill styles, and you probably need to draw another oval that's not filled and give it a stroke style, but it's the same as the fill style, and you can play with those at your leisure. So that is how you draw in JavaScript. And now we'll kind of apply some of these lines and circles into our this week's project. All right, so in your project, I'm in, well, my project. Remember that we're using Node now. So in order to view the pages and have them work correctly, you need to start server.js that we created, or that you created, or that's in the folder that I provided on the website. I've not changed any of the names. It's still saying chapter 6, but we are working on chapter 7, and we're going to do those drawings. So make sure you start your node server.js. It should say it's listening, ready for requests, and then you can open your page to your password. Remember, type in 127.0.0.1 semicolon 8080, and it should go straight to your index page and work. This, if you go to inspect and you go to your storage, local storage, click on that file and look in here. I got a couple other things, but in your patient database, you should have the database in there. That's where it pulls the passwords from. So any one of these passwords should work. and allow you to get to the next page when you put the password in. If you put the wrong password in and hit enter, it should give you passcode not valid. Backspace should work. Your reset button should work. And again, if you put in the right password and hit enter, it should take you to the about page, which is boring and hasn't changed anything. Your patient data page or patient info page should also be working at this point. If you're using Node, again, go to local storage in your inspector, click on the patient database, and you should see that database still there. This allows you to do these other things that are down here at the bottom. So if I type in Steve Rogers and hit search, it should pull up his information from the database. I should be able to clear that patient info. If I want to add a patient, John Smith, give him a birthday, whatever date, give him a password, say he's 6 foot tall and weighs 400 pounds, and he's a male. If I hit add or edit, it should add him and give you this little patient alert saying that the patient information has been added to the database. And if we look over at the database, the last object here is John Smith with the date of birth, his password, height, weight, and gender. So that should work on yours. If you then click delete, it should, alert you, hey, it's going to delete this patient from the record. Do you want to continue? When you hit OK, you should see that record deleted, and it should confirm that it's deleted. And at the same time, if you want to, let's see, if I do Steve Rogers again, and I do a search, look over here on the database. Which number is he? He's number 1, object 1. It has him at 74 inches and 240. So if I change his weight to 500 pounds and I hit add or edit, it should say the patient is already in the database. Would you like to update the record? You click OK. It does not add a record, but his weight should have changed in local data. So all that should be done. And again, you can see that in my code, how that works. Hopefully you got enough from last week's video to make this all work. This week, we're going to move from here. Let me go ahead and put this back because I think that's his actual weight. This week, what should happen is once you search for somebody and have all these fields, when you click on the graph, it should go to the graph. You're going to insert this image that I've provided for you, and it should draw these 3 circles and 2 lines that indicate what his body mass index is. And his height and his weight come to, he has a BMI of 31. When you go over to the recommendations page, it should provide this picture, which I gave you in the assets folder. It should draw this little box here, this orange and pink box, just the colors I chose. You can choose whatever colors you want, make it however you want to make it. And it should give you a little custom message based on whatever the BMI is. So it says that Steve Rogers is obese because his BMI is between 30 and 34.9. And down here just gives you a little message. So in order to do that, you have to do a few things. Obviously, with the use of Node, it allows that patient database to stay persistent. So we can keep adding and taking from that database and make these graphs. So in your JavaScript file, the first thing you're going to want to do is add a variable for BMI. And I put it all the way up here at the top. I like to always kind of put all my variables all the way at the top. So I just created a variable for the BMI, made it equal to 0, and left it there. So we have in here, we have our pin functions, reset, check pin. We have the functions that we should have done last week for clearing the form, checking the form to see if all the data is there, If we're editing the info, this is how we're editing the info. Check to see if the patient that you're trying to add is already in there. Adding the patient, searching the database, deleting the patient from the database. And this is where we'll start for this week. This calculate or calc function is to calculate the BMI. So here we're gonna declare a couple of variables, and we want to get the height, weight, and gender of the current view. So we're searching for Steve Rogers. When that information comes up, we're going to grab that information and hold on to it in a variable. So we want to get his height. So we ask the document to get that element by the ID, the text height. We want the value of that. We want the value of the text weight, and we want the value of that drop-down menu, where there's male, female. We're going to then use that information to calculate the BMI, and this is the formula for BMI. It's 703 times the current weight divided by the current height squared. We're then going to set those in local storage. They are not in the same database. They are just the variables that we declared up here, and we're putting those in local storage so that we can then use those to draw some stuff. So in here, what I've done, I've drawn a function to draw the weight circle, a function for the height circle, a function for the BMI circle. So you got your height and weight, and then wherever it falls on that chart is your BMI circle, and then the lines to and from. I've made all these functions up, and they don't get called until I do the draw function. So for the circles, instead of using the ellipse, I'm using the draw circle weight function. I guess I just created this. So all we need is we need the CTX passed to it. So this is going to be really confusing. In the draw function, I declare, let's do this. I'll go over the draw function first, and then we'll go back. I'm pretty sure you have to stack these in this order so that they'll work. Like JavaScript needs to see the draw circle function before you actually call the draw circle function. So on your graph page, what you're going to want to do is set this an onload function for the draw. That way, as soon as you click the button and it navigates over to the graph page, it automatically draws those circles and lines on the chart. Something else you're going to want to do is, this is a change as well from last week, your canvas, where the actual chart is drawn. This picture here is 800 by 600, I think. So you want to do this. You make a canvas, give it the ID of graph canvas, and give it a style of the background image. You have to have a folder with that image in there, BMI chart.png. So an images folder, just like your CSS and JavaScript, with that image in there. And this is how you then make that the background for the canvas. Make sure the width is 800 and the height is 600. That's important because all of the X and Y coordinates I gave you for those match up with it being 6 by 800. If you change that, then all the coordinates are going to be off. So I was trying to save you some work, but you may end up giving yourself some extra work if it's not 8 by 600 pixels. So that's two things you need to change on your graph.html. Make sure it has the onload.draw and your canvas here, just like this. So we go back to the JavaScript. It's a constant variable here. And so instead of just var, I did constant variable canvas. It's never going to change. It's our graph canvas. And again, I use CTX make it 2D. And then I gave you these two variables in the assets.zip folder. Just paste them in there. And this is an X and Y coordinate for each one of the weights and heights on here. So this is 1, this is 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this is how these two circles here will be drawn using those coordinates. So that's why it's important that the graph or the canvas picture stay the same size, 600 by 800. All right, so after we tell the canvas, we tell it's 2D, we put these variables in here. We're going to get the variable h from local storage. Remember, we stored it when we did the calculate the BMI. Now we're going to pull it back out, give it h, and that's going to be the height. Variable w is going to be the weight, but sometimes that weight can be funny and it won't actually add up, or it won't line up correctly. Like if he's 121 pounds or 129 pounds, we don't have a x and y for that. So we're going to round it either to 120 or 130. We're just rounding it to make life easier. We're going to round it up. We're going to grab that weight, we're going to divide it by 10 and multiply it by 10, and then round it. And that should give us one or the other instead of somewhere in between. I have done this console log just to kind of show myself what values I'm getting. So if you can see over here, maybe under my head, let me disappear my head. So over here, you can see in the console that I have the height at 74, the weight at 240, which is just what it was on his patient info page. And if you go back, you have to redo it. Search. All right, and then I go to graph. And I got his height is 74 inches, which is 6 foot 2 inches. His weight is 240, which goes right there. So it makes the circle. I got that X and Y value for the, I think this one, the BMI circle. Logging. So down here, this is the function that's going to actually search through these variables. It's not a function, it's a for statement. But it's going to loop through the length of the height graph, right? So the height graph variable, I'm declaring I, if you remember loops that we did, you're declaring a variable I, it's going to be 0, as long as I is less than the length of the height graph variable, which is all of these variables. It's a string within strings, or an array. So as long as I is less than the length of the array, it's going to add 1 to I. And while it's doing that, if h is equal to the height graph, if the height that you get, which was 74 inches, is equal to the height graph 1, whatever. So it's going to go through here. That's 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 69, all the way to 74. And then it's going to say, okay, if he's 74 inches, I need that x coordinate of 411 pixels. And that's, again, comes back to the y value of 411. And then it gets an x value of 612 and puts that circle right there. So I know that's a little confusing, and I'm just showing you the code. You need to make it work. So we get the y coordinate and we get the x coordinate of where that BMI circle is going to be drawn. And then we draw the circle. So remember, we needed 4 lines to make a circle. No, that was a line. We were doing ellipse, so we needed 7 arguments. Here, we only need 4. But we need that CTX. We need to know the canvas context is 2D. We're going to get an X and Y coordinates. And we're going to draw the circle This is the height circle, the weight circle. I'm going to draw some lines, and the BMI circle. So that is draw. Now these four right here are functions. We're calling these functions. And if you remember, I kind of started at the bottom and I'm working my way to the top. So inside your draw function, you are calling, let's do circle height. You're calling the circle height function and you're passing it the CTX and some other variables. If we go up to the draw height circle, you'll see that I created this. Oh, let me zoom in. See, I created the draw height circle function, and it needs the CTX, it needs the center X coordinate, the center Y coordinate, and a radius. So when we pass it that, they're all going to be the same. Like the circles are the same, the radius and the center. So I just hard coded 40 and 20 in there, but it needs that Y. Where'd it go? Draw height circle. It needs a center Y. The center X is always going to be the same, and the radius will be the same. So I created this variable for the start angle in radians, and it's 0. The ending angle in radians is always just going to be 2 times math.pi, which keeps it simple. The beginning path is that center X, which if we scroll back down, this gets confusing. The center X is going to be 40. Draw height. Center X is going to be 40, center Y, radius, starting, ending. So you need these anyway. It's we're using an arc here instead of an ellipse. And the arc needs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments. But I did try to dumb it down a little bit so you didn't have to change much. I know this is really hard to follow, and I apologize. So we've got our CTX, we got our center X, center Y, and the radius. And then we just tell it, we give it these, and it ends up giving us a full circle with the arc command. I made the line width 8. You can do what you want. That's just how thick the circles are, each circle. And this was a stroke style that I created, just the colors. If you remember from just a few minutes ago in the ovals where we did a fill style, this is just a stroke style, kind of the same thing, just changes the color of the line. And for each one of these, I have a function for the weight circle, a function for the height circle, a function for the BMI circle. They all take the same arguments. They look very much the same. And your lines, we're passing it again the CTX and an X and a Y coordinate. Remember, you needed your 4 lines, the begin path, your move to, and your line to. So I used the coordinates in here, did some crazy math, and it's always starting in the same place and ending in the same, well, not ending in the same place, but it's always going to start in the same line. It's always going to start on this line, and that I think is 50 pixels. And this Y, it's always going to start on this line at the same spot, as long as everything is in the same things. The only difference is how long this line is going to be, changes. And the only difference is how long this line is going to be, changes. So once you have all these, you're drawing your lines and your circles. I just, again, put them in one function, so when you load the page, it all onloads. And then you call them, you call them at the end of that draw function. And all that should be on your graph page. This should all be done on your graph page. So make sure that on your graph page, you have this onload draw. And then when you click over, it should just automatically do it. Like mine did. Let's do somebody else. Where is I curled this up too far? So somebody else. Bart Simpson. He's really short. £4'8" and 85 pounds. So I'm click over. Oh, what happened here? We have a 4'8", and I guess it went up to 95 pounds. BMI of 26. He's too short to be on here, so don't worry about Bart Simpson. Too short doesn't weigh enough because he's a fictional character. Let's do Anakin Skywalker. Now we'll graph him. All right, he's 200 pounds, 6'2". BMI is 26. So all these circles, the height circle, the weight circle, and the BMI circle all get drawn, and then those lines get drawn from those same coordinates to the same coordinates. And then when we go to the recommendations page, you need to have an onload for that as well. So we click over to the recommendations page. He says apparently he's overweight too. On your recommendations page, you need to also have that onload function, and I called mine draw box. It's a little bit easier than those circles, but if we scroll down to the draw box function, so we got to do a few things here. I gave you two images, one with a male body mass index and one with a female body mass index. We have to change that based on the gender of the person that we're looking at. So I created a variable that grabs the gender from the local storage. Remember when we did the calc? When we did the calc function, we stored in height, weight, BMI, and gender. So now we're going to pull that gender out to use on the recommendations page. We're going to grab that with the get item gender. I just made the variable G for ease of use. If G equals male, we're going to get that document, we're going to get that element called Rex Canvas. And not sure if I told you to do this or not. On your recommendations page, you have to have the onload for whatever function. I called mine drawbox. You also have to have your canvas up there. I made this canvas 600 by 800, and I gave it the ID of Rex Canvas. So in your JavaScript, you're going to grab that element by ID. You're going to set an attribute of style. So if you remember on the graph page, right here in the HTML, we gave it an ID and then we gave it a style of a background image. We're going to do the same thing, but with JavaScript on the Rex page so we can make it dynamic. So we're going to set that attribute style to a background image, the male BMI or the female BMI based on the gender variable. And you should have both of those files in that assets.zip. So that right there is just an if statement that that sets the background. We're going to then get the BMI and store it in a variable called BMI. And I have that console log. All this does is stick it in the console so that you know what it's looking at. And if you do the inspect and look at your console, you can see here that I have the gender. This is the G variable set to male. So the background is male. And the BMI, the BMI was 25. So, so it knows that. And now, unfortunately, there's a little bit of code here. If you see on this page, you're underweight if your BMI is less than 18.5. Between 18.5 and 24.9, you're normal, and so et cetera, et cetera. So you have to account for each one of those. So I did an if statement for each one. So here, if your BMI is less than 18.5, X variable is going to be 17. And this is for my drawing a rectangle, and I pass it X. So X is going to be 17, and that's going to be the center of my rectangle. And I just did that kind of measurement. You can use these same, if yours all the same size, your canvas is the same size, the picture's the same size, which it should be because I gave it to you. The center should be the same. So X, and it's always going to be the same size box, 150 by 150 by, well, the Y is 150. Again, let me go back. The center is going to be whatever that X is. It's going to be, man, I forget already. 150 pixels wide. It's so the center is X, and then the Y up and down is going to be 150. It's 150 pixels wide and 400 pixels tall. And most of that, the only thing that changes is that X variable to put it over the next category, or the obese, normal, underweight. So the only thing that changes for that box is the X value. And that, again, is based on their BMI. So it's between 18.5 and under 24.9. The X value is going to be 163 pixels, and we just kind of put some information in there to say, hey, you're either normal, you're overweight, you're obese, whatever it may be. So these X coordinates, you'll pass them down here. We're going to draw a rectangle. Remember, you have to have a begin path. This global alpha, again, is styling. It's just kind of semi-transparent. You're going to draw a rectangle using that X coordinate from the if statements. And then these are always going to be the same height, weight, and size, or same height, width, and Y value. Your line width, again, is a style, stroke style. Stroke it, fill style, and fill it. You change these, make them something different to your tastes. I don't know why I chose the color I chose, but I did. So I don't know any cool colors off the top of my head. I think that's like a gray. If I save this, okay, and that's something else. We're using server. We use a node. So Control C stops it. And if you just hit your up arrow, it'll do the last command that you did. Hit enter and it's listening again. Anytime you change anything, you have to stop the server and restart the server. I go back. If I refresh this, okay, see, I just changed this outside line to gray. It's just a style. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff in here. I expect you probably are going to pause and redo it and look at it a billion times. But it should all be correct. This all needs to work at the end of this assignment. When you turn it in, everything needs to work. Control Z. I don't like that gray, so I'm changing that back. Restart my server. Refresh this. All right, so everything should work. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'll also put a link up to last year's video, which is the same assignment. Maybe I explained it a little better last year. Maybe I don't. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.